Here are 15 dark psychology tricks that can influence and control you without you even being aware of it. These subtle tactics have the power to shape your decisions, emotions, and even your behavior, all while keeping you oblivious to their manipulation. The Lucifer effect. One of the most insidious tactics is known as the Lucifer effect. This strategy gradually erodes a person's moral boundaries without them realizing it. It starts with seemingly harmless actions, minor requests that push the limits of your values, such as telling a small lie on someone's behalf. Over time, these small moral compromises stack up. Those tiny white lies turn into bigger ones, leading you into unethical territory you never imagined venturing into. Before you know it, you've crossed lines you swore you'd never cross, and by then, turning back feels almost impossible because it would mean confronting just how far you've strayed. The most frightening part, you likely never realized you were being manipulated from the start. The dark triad: Machiavellianism, narcissism, psychopathy. The dark triad refers to three manipulative personality traits: Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy. Individually or combined, these traits can be weaponized to control, deceive, and exploit others. Machiavellianism. This is all about calculated deception. Manipulators with this trait will lie, cheat, and strategize relentlessly to achieve their goals, often without any regard for the harm caused. Narcissism. Narcissists wield charm and charisma to gain admiration and loyalty. They use their sense of entitlement and superiority to win your trust, only to twist that loyalty to serve their personal agenda. Psychopathy. Defined by a lack of empathy and guilt. Psychopaths are cold and calculating. They don't care about the pain or damage they inflict on others, making them particularly dangerous manipulators. A skilled manipulator might blend all three traits to achieve their aims. They could charm you into trusting them, deceive you with carefully constructed lies, and then exploit you with complete emotional detachment from the consequences of their actions. Inoculation theory. The inoculation theory acts like a psychological vaccine. Just as exposure to a harmless version of a virus helps protect your body, a manipulator can inoculate your mind against opposing viewpoints by introducing weaker versions of those arguments. Here's how it works. The manipulator casually mentions a watered-down or flawed version of an opposing idea. For instance, they might say, "Some people claim this approach won't work, but they don't see the full picture." This frames the opposing argument as poorly thought out or uninformed. Later, when you encounter a stronger and more convincing version of that same argument, you're more likely to dismiss it outright because the manipulator has already planted the idea that it's flawed. By doing this, they've preemptively disarmed potential opposition, ensuring their narrative stays dominant in your mind. These are just a few examples of the subtle but powerful psychological tactics that can be used to shape your thoughts and decisions without you realizing it. Recognizing these tricks is the first step toward protecting yourself from manipulation. Subliminal priming. Subliminal priming is a subtle yet highly effective method of persuasion. It works by influencing your thoughts and actions without your conscious awareness, using barely noticeable cues like words, images, or sounds. These cues are designed to bypass your conscious mind and directly impact your subconscious. Here's how it works. A manipulator introduces specific stimuli that subtly guide your thoughts in their desired direction. For instance, if they want you to feel at ease and open to their suggestions, they might employ soothing music, calming colors, or repeatedly use reassuring words like trust or relax during your conversation. Without realizing it, your brain picks up on these signals, and as a result, you become more relaxed and willing to agree with their ideas. This technique is both discreet and powerful, shaping your emotions and decisions without overt instructions. It's persuasion that happens in the shadows of your awareness, influencing how you think without you ever suspecting it. The foot-in-the-door technique. The foot-in-the-door technique is a psychological strategy that builds on small commitments to lead you toward agreeing to larger requests. Here's how it plays out. Someone first asks you for a minor favor or a small task, something so trivial that you're unlikely to refuse. Once you've agreed, they follow up with a bigger request. Why does this work? Because after saying yes to the smaller favor, you feel an internal need to stay consistent. Refusing the larger request might make you feel guilty or uncooperative, so you're more inclined to comply. For example, a manipulator might start by asking you for a quick favor, like signing a petition. Once you've done that, they escalate the request, asking you to donate money or invest your time in their cause. Since you've already committed to helping, declining the second request feels contradictory to the helpful image you want to maintain. This technique thrives on your desire for consistency and your reluctance to backtrack on prior commitments, making it a simple yet powerful tool for manipulation. Ambiguity exploitation. Ambiguity exploitation is a manipulation tactic rooted in confusion. A manipulator deliberately keeps things vague or unclear, creating an environment where they maintain control. This vagueness shifts power into their hands, while leaving you uncertain and dependent on their guidance. Here's an example. In a workplace scenario, a manipulative colleague might give you deliberately vague instructions for a project. When you ask for more details, they remain elusive. If the project doesn't meet expectations, they blame you for misunderstanding, even though their unclear guidance was the real issue. The brilliance of this tactic lies in its flexibility. By keeping things ambiguous, the manipulator avoids accountability and ensures they can adjust their stance to suit their needs. Meanwhile, you're left feeling uncertain and possibly even at fault, giving them the upper hand in the situation. This technique works because humans naturally seek clarity, and when clarity is denied, we tend to rely on the person withholding it for direction. The manipulator leverages this dependency, subtly steering events in their favor. The door-in-the-face technique. The door-in-the-face technique is a strategic method of manipulation where the manipulator begins with an intentionally large and unrealistic request. This initial request is almost guaranteed to be declined. Once you say no, they immediately follow up with a smaller, seemingly more reasonable request. Here's how it works in practice. Imagine someone asks you for a significant favor, like lending them a large sum of money or committing to an overwhelming task. Naturally, you refuse because the request feels excessive. But then, they pivot to a much smaller favor, perhaps lending a smaller amount or helping with something minor. Compared to the first request, this second one feels far more manageable, even though you might not have agreed to it if it had been the only ask. The magic of this tactic lies in the psychological pressure created by your initial refusal. Rejecting the first request often leaves you feeling a twinge of guilt or the need to compensate, making you more likely to say yes to the second. By cleverly leveraging this guilt, the manipulator can get what they originally wanted, a smaller favor you wouldn't have considered under different circumstances. The contrast principle. The contrast principle is another psychological trick used to shape your perception by changing what something is compared to. By presenting an extreme option first, manipulators make their actual request or offers seem much more reasonable in comparison. Let's break it down. A manipulator might begin by showing you an exaggerated or over-the-top option, such as a highly expensive product or an outrageous demand. They know you'll likely reject it because it feels too extreme. Then, they present their true option, the one they wanted you to accept all along. Against the backdrop of the initial extreme request, the second option now appears moderate, even attractive. For example, in a sales scenario, a manipulator might first show you an overpriced item. When you decline, they introduce a less expensive item that feels like a bargain in contrast. Even though the second item may not actually be a great deal, your perception has been skewed by the comparison. This technique thrives on framing the act of positioning one option to seem favorable by placing it next to something far worse. It's a subtle yet powerful way to nudge people toward a desired choice without overt pressure. Learned helplessness. Learned helplessness is a psychological condition where someone starts to feel powerless to change their circumstances, even when they actually have the ability to do so. This sense of defeat is often cultivated through repeated exposure to negative or stressful situations that seem impossible to overcome. Here's how a manipulator exploits this. They repeatedly place you in situations where your efforts lead to failure or where your actions appear inconsequential. Over time, you begin to believe that nothing you do will make a difference. This belief keeps you trapped in a cycle of inaction and resignation, even when you could take steps to improve your situation. For instance, in a toxic relationship, a manipulative partner might constantly criticize you or dismiss your contributions, making you feel like nothing you do is ever good enough. As this pattern continues, you might stop trying to stand up for yourself or change the dynamic because you've internalized the belief that your efforts are futile. This state of learned helplessness gives the manipulator significant control. Once you feel powerless, you're more likely to depend on them for guidance and direction, even though you have the capacity to reclaim your autonomy. It's a sinister yet effective way to erode your sense of self-worth and keep you in a submissive position. These subtle psychological tactics, whether through guilt, perception manipulation, or fostering helplessness can be incredibly effective tools for control. By understanding how they work, you can recognize and counteract them, safeguarding your autonomy and decision-making power. Information overload happens when someone is deliberately overwhelmed with a flood of information, leaving them unable to process or focus on what truly matters. This state of mental confusion creates an opportunity for a manipulator to subtly influence your choices. Here's how it works. The manipulator might bombard you with excessive details, technical jargon, or irrelevant facts. The sheer volume of information makes it difficult to prioritize or analyze effectively, leaving you feeling overwhelmed and mentally fatigued. In this state, you're more likely to follow their suggestions because sorting through the chaos feels too exhausting. By carefully controlling the flow and complexity of the information they present, manipulators can subtly guide your decision-making without you even realizing what's happening. This tactic plays on your natural desire to simplify and find clarity, making you vulnerable to influence. The scarcity tactic. The scarcity tactic is designed to exploit the fear of missing out by making something appear rare, exclusive, or time-sensitive. This perceived scarcity triggers urgency and often compels you to act without fully considering your options. For example, a manipulator might claim, "There are only 2 spots left," or "This deal is valid only until midnight." Hearing this creates a sense of pressure. Bypassing your usual decision-making process, the urgency to seize the fleeting opportunity overrides your rational thinking, making you more likely to comply with their request. This tactic is effective because it taps into our innate fear of loss, whether it's missing out on a chance, a product, or an opportunity. By creating this artificial sense of urgency, manipulators push you to act impulsively rather than thoughtfully. False memory planting. False memory planting is a subtle yet powerful manipulation technique where someone convinces you to believe in an event or agreement that never actually occurred. Here's how it's done. A manipulator repeatedly suggests that something specific happened, even though it didn't. For example, they might say, "Remember when we agreed on this plan?" Initially, you might doubt their claim, but over time, the repeated suggestion starts to feel familiar. You begin to trust the fabricated memory as real, even though it never happened. This tactic is particularly dangerous because it exploits your trust in your own recollections. By controlling your perception of past events, the manipulator gains a powerful tool to influence your future decisions or win arguments. Emotional contagion. Emotional contagion refers to the unconscious spreading of emotions from one person to others. Manipulators use this tactic to control the emotional state of a group or individual by projecting strong feelings. For instance, a manipulator who wants to create anxiety or urgency might display heightened stress, speaking quickly and appearing agitated. Without realizing it, those around them begin to mirror these emotions, becoming anxious themselves. Similarly, if they exude excitement or confidence, their energy can influence others to feel optimistic or enthusiastic. By steering the emotional tone of a situation, manipulators can subtly control how others react, ensuring their desired outcome aligns with the emotional state they've created. The Golem effect. The Golem effect occurs when low expectations are imposed on someone, leading them to perform poorly because they internalize those negative beliefs. A manipulator leveraging this effect might consistently assign you minor tasks or give subtle feedback implying you're not capable of achieving more significant results. Over time, you start believing these low expectations and unconsciously lower your performance to match them. This creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. As your performance declines, the manipulator reinforces their low opinion of you, keeping you dependent on their guidance and validation. It's a cycle designed to diminish your confidence and autonomy. Paradoxical intention. Paradoxical intention is a manipulation tactic where someone encourages you to focus on avoiding a specific behavior, which ironically makes you more likely to engage in it. For example, if you're trying to stay calm, a manipulator might say, "I bet you can't keep your cool right now." This challenge shifts your attention to avoiding losing control, which creates pressure and makes it harder for you to remain composed. By planting this seed of doubt, manipulators use your own efforts against you, causing you to act in ways you were actively trying to avoid. It's a clever way to create internal conflict and gain the upper hand in a situation. These manipulation tactics, whether through confusion, urgency, false memories, emotional influence, diminished confidence, or psychological conflict, highlight how easily our minds can be steered by subtle techniques. By understanding these methods, you can recognize and resist their influence, reclaiming control over your decisions and emotions.